Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to This Week at Work, the only show to pack workplace news, practical HR solutions, and timely insights into every 30-minute episode.
I don't know any HR people who are sitting back with time on their hands to work on improving cultural and employee relation factors in the workplace. They're working on recruiting, they're working on terminations and separations. You don't have time to do these other activities like engaging the managers and supervisors to be better leaders, which are the things that are going to improve retention, improve productivity, limit the complaints that are coming in for HR. Our intentions are we can do that. I want to do that. But the reality is you're better off to bring in a professional who works with the workforce because that's the best way to improve your workforce in a short period of time that then lessens the stressors on HR.
What's keeping you up at night? Let's face it together now on This Week at Work.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Good morning, Bert. How are you?
I'm doing well, Phil. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good. You know what today is, Bert?
What is it, Phil? I feel like it should be. I should know this off the top of my head.
And I know that you do. You and I have been partners for over 13 years. We've been working together. We're going on our 14th year since we met and been working together, and it's been a great relationship. And we've done a lot of things over that time. And we've done all kinds of programs around the region with large audiences, small audiences, and I'd like to think in there somewhere we've helped somebody be a little bit better or avoid some risk, mitigate some risk. But the one thing that we've done more consistently than anything else is this podcast. And this podcast started 5 years, 2 days ago.
Wow.
March 11th was our very first one, 2020. And we called it, and we had no idea we were ever going to do a second one. We just, COVID had just hit, and we were like, people have questions. They don't understand, are they an essential workforce? What do they have to do if people are coming to work? Should they shut down? How do they shut down? And we had more questions than we could ever get to. And we took over an hour just going through one question after another, answering questions for people. And that was March 11th, 2020. We called it the coronavirus webinar, right? It was a coronavirus webinar. And if you'll remember, we had people call in and ask their question live online, and then we would answer the question. It was a great program, and we did it every single day, I think, throughout that period, leading up to today, where we do it once a week. We have over 6,000 listeners. It's really been a very successful program. We've changed our name now 3 times, right? So we've gone coronavirus webinar to the morning briefing, because then we started branching off beyond the coronavirus conditions, and now This Week at Work, and what a production it has become. And producer Nick, you came in shortly after that to give us a hand, so thank you too. There you go.
Getting better.
We didn't have
sound
sound effects like that at first, Bert. It was just the talent was you and I. Just
exactly.
You and I.
We've really upped the game. Nick's upped his game, and we must be doing something right. Maybe even things that could earn us some stars on some of our podcast locations out there. We're on Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Give us a review.
Yeah, it's and that's one thing we've never really asked for is reviews, right? You and I are just focused on the facts. We just like to get things done and help people move along. But you hear people ask for it, and we probably should too. If you do get a chance to give us a review, we would appreciate that. That does help bring attention to the program, and it helps other people find us, so that they can get maybe some of the same solutions and value out of the program that you get from it as well. And we'd appreciate that if you do. Bert, that means maybe you should go in and review yourself, and I'll review you, Bert, and you review me. How's
Perfect.
that?
You're getting
Okay.
5 stars, Phil. If there were 6, I'd give them to you.
Hey, you know what? I don't know how you could think any less. All right. I appreciate that. Let's get on with the program. But happy anniversary to you, Bert.
And you as
Nick,
well.
thank you
And
for
Nick,
all the work you and Feature Group do. It's been a pleasure to work with you guys for 5 years now. Thank you very much. All right. So, topic. That was a good intro, Nick. People having time on their hands to do things, and what are they trying to do? I want to just spend some time today talking about what's happening in the workplace, because more than ever, we've had employers focused. And when I say employers, I'm talking about, an organization led, in this case, by, a CEO, a business owner, and an HR professional. And too often that HR professional is really bogged down in what they're trying to achieve with the mandatory elements of the job. And we don't get a chance to focus on the things that are important to improving the efficiency of the organization. So we're focusing on, we got to recruit. And yes, recruiting adds to efficiency, but not in a way that it makes us better. It just gets us to the level playing field. But recruiting and then employees departing, and then turnover and benefits and pay and discipline and employee handbooks and policy and so forth. And what we don't spend our time on is really working on how do we make our management team and our employee workforce more engaging and better, so that we get better productivity. And that seems to be what every HR professional I talk to would like to be doing. And Bert, I know you work with them a lot in the legal and compliance side. But when you're doing that, you recognize if we had better employee relations, if we had a better management teams, if management was better at communicating, better at engaging, better at listening, better at intervening at the right time, many of the things you work with would probably be avoided. So today I just want to spend a little time focusing on that. We've got some great case studies. Tanya Zion, who's been on the show several times, does some phenomenal work in this area. And I shared just a few numbers last week on how she has really helped make an impact with different employers around the region when she gets a chance to work with them and help them improve the employee relations and the effectiveness of their leadership teams. And it's really second to none. You can't argue with her results. So if you struggle with getting things done, like lack of trust with leadership, right? That's always something that can turn out on an employee opinion engagement survey and say, well, we just don't trust the leadership as much as we would like. And leaders would look at that result and say, well, how can they not trust us? We're never dishonest. But there's lots of good reasons and ways to improve that. If you have silos and poor collaborations around the organization, unclear strategic direction, compensation concerns, you have turnover. These are the types of things that Tanya is helping organizations work on, better communications and so on. So when we think about HR teams, Bert, the first thing that is happening is the workload of an HR team is it's growing to a point to where there isn't, as I was saying, there isn't time to pause and work with focus on employee engagement because of these other issues. They're already skinny down. They're already what we would consider a necessary evil, and they're focusing on those other issues. The question is how does this inability to act on employee feedback affect the overall engagement and retention of employees? Because it leads to frustration, disengagement, looking elsewhere for, a place to belong, because people are just looking to belong, right? That sense of belonging. This place fits for me. There's a loss of trust in leadership, and the feedback process isn't always as robust as we would like it to. And the culture where employees feel that they do make a difference and they do matter. These are some of the things that we're trying to help create improvement on. And if you're focused every day on those things we talked about sooner, my question is, where and how do you find time to improve these other areas that end up making a difference on your employee opinion and feedback engagement scores? So today, Bert, let's chat a little bit about that before we get into lawyer on the clock. I guess what I would ask you, Bert, is when you are working with a team because maybe they've had a threat of a union, they've had some legal challenges through the EEOC or whatever it is, and you go in and you perform your due diligence, you look at what's going on. What are some of the common things that you discover that aren't really related to policy? They're not really related to the legal aspect. They're really related to, the behaviors and the way that management is working. What do you often find in that space?
Yeah, I think the one word that absolutely comes to mind first for me is lack of communication. And that's what I see occurring most frequently. And the lack of communication, it might be just that the HR people aren't getting out and about within the facility to check on the workforce, to interact with the workforce. And the problem is that from the way I see it is that HR, like a lot of other jobs, HR in particular, though, a lot of HR practitioners, they prepare their lists, their action plans of things that they want to get done. And they try to create that structured process. And as soon as they walk into work in the morning, that gets thrown out the window because they spend the entire day putting out fires. And so they never get to those bigger picture items like you're talking about that would really help in the long run to stem the turnover and to create greater employee satisfaction. They just never can get to those items. And so I again, a lot of those surround the idea of increasing communication, better communication with employees. I think ultimately it would reduce some of their workload, but they can just never quite get there because of time.
Yeah, it is that vicious circle, right? When you're just consumed with other must-dos, that we don't get the opportunity that we can work on some of these things that will actually improve things. When you mentioned communication, I was curious what answer you would give. So I'm just looking at our survey results here, and this particular organization that we did a case study on had increase in engagement. This was one of the number two things they were looking at, and that one of the top results that they had was an improvement in communication effectiveness. Since you mentioned communication, and I would challenge anyone on their own in the field of HR, and I think this sometimes is where it's really difficult, right? Because an HR professional wants to do this. This is like when I talk to them, this is what they're excited about. I've not met that one yet that's like, man, I'm excited I get to work on that employee handbook, right? I'm going to write a new policy for leave management. I'm going to work on our discipline structure. They want to work on things like better communications in the workplace. It's just not the priority at that moment because of the other things that are pressing. In this particular case study, communications in 1 year, Bert, 1 year from 2023 to 2024, improved 35 points. So the communication effectiveness was at 28%.
Wow.
Now,
That's
that
low.
seems like, holy smokes, that's low. I will tell
That's
you
low.
right.
That's low, but that's probably normal.
It is very normal. It's not nearly, very seldom is it significantly higher than that. It might be marginally higher or lower than that, but that's not all that off from norm. And then in 2024, they improved 35 points to 63%. 63% effective communication is right up near the top, right? At that point, you're getting very good at communicating. You're getting to over 60% of your workforce saying, hey, I think these guys are doing a good job. I think they're getting it right. It's effective. And it starts with communication. And from there, everything else starts to fall in line. I look at some other things here and I put organizations make the necessary changes to stay competitive. Like people want to know that. and often don't understand what their business is doing to stay competitive, which means, hey, I might have longevity here. Because the moment we hear, hey, things might be tough, right?
Yes.
Resumes go out. People start looking for jobs. They had a 32% improvement, right? 34% originally in 2023 thought that the management team was doing and taking the necessary changes to stay competitive. 1 year later, 66%. Now, some people might say 66% is not very good. I can tell you this particular organization wants it to be better than that. But I would also say that's a very good score.
I agree. I agree.
66% is a very good score.
Yeah, that's a big number. And, again, it's the organizations that have ineffective communication that have the most problems. Like you said, it's that vicious circle that keeps going around and around. And so, some of the things that I think are most important are for HR practitioners to establish an action plan. And I know it seems kind of rudimentary, but figure out what the priorities are for the HR department and put those down on paper and try to hold yourself accountable. And again, I know it's difficult because you walk into work every day figuring that you're going to get to tackle some of these items on the action plan. And instead, you're being pulled in 20 different directions. So-and-so's late, so-and-so called in, so-and-so had an accident on the floor. This employee needs FMLA, and you spend all day putting out fires. And I know that derails getting to that action plan. But some of the things that you can try to do is to prioritize that action plan. And that might mean having to delegate and collaborate with other employees, with coworkers, to empowering the managers to address concerns with their teams, with the guidance of HR, and not necessarily having to do it all yourself.
Yeah, I think that is a critical point because the management team wants to improve. A supervisor wants to be a part of a successful organization, and they want their employees to have positive opinions about them. There's very few supervisors, managers, leaders who are saying, I really don't care what anybody's opinion is. That's
Right.
not true. People care. They absolutely care. And when they feel that people don't value them, their behaviors actually get worse with an effort to gain improvement or to get better. They actually behave in a worse way, if that makes any sense at all, unintentionally, but it doesn't create the improvement that you're looking for. I want to share one more result, Bert, because I think this one is really important, particularly in today's time, and it's the perception of leadership being ethical, right?
Yes, very important to today's generation. Ethical, moral, socially responsible is another way I would describe it.
Absolutely. And all of those things kind of wrap together. And we all have opinions of companies being ethical and socially responsible, people being ethical, politicians being ethical and socially responsible, all of these things. And we all have opinions. This is significant, right? So in 2028, the opinion, this is all the same company. These are improvements in one company. And this is the work that Tanya was able to do. In 2023, they were 28%, right? And I would say right around that 30 is probably where most companies kind of net out. In 2024, they improved 35 points to 63%.
Wow.
I mean, this organization was able to get behind it. Now, I'm going to go back to something you said. It wasn't because they were able to write it down and just say, well, I'm going to focus more on it, right? You have to put energy behind it different than that. And sometimes it takes sustained pressure and focus from the outside to help. And I guess that would be my message to our listeners today. I know you want to do it, and I know you have the ability to do it. I'm not sure that it ever happens in levels like this, with this kind of improvement, without the attention from an outside advisor, someone that can help be a voice with you to help you achieve these types of results. You get all the credit, right? In this case, if you're working with AIM in this, we don't take any credit or any banner to it. This company did it. This leadership team did that. It starts with their owner and the CEO, and then it goes right through every single leader and every employee in the organization. And I'd love to be able to share the results or the name of the company, but sometimes we're careful on how we do that. But they did I'm so proud of this organization, and it's an old historic business that works in a tough environment, and they've done a great job. But my message to anyone listening today is if you want improvements like that, reach out, let us know. We'd be happy to help work with you and find out where can we start the journey, and let's look back a year later and see where you're at. You can achieve those very same results. There was nothing magical about what we did. So anyway, I wanted to share that. Quite a different discussion than we had 5 years ago. But one thing that we started doing shortly after coronavirus was our segment Lawyer on the Clock. Bert, are you ready for that? Because that is a fan favorite group.
I'm ready, Phil. We got a lot today.
Oh, you take this is me. Nick, are you ready?
I'm good
Pull
to go.
that lever, Nick.
Curious about a case that could wreck your workplace? Lucky for you, we have a lawyer on the clock.
So, Phil, unless you have been living under a rock these days, everybody out
Someday
there,
I'd like to live under a rock for a while, Bert.
I'm envisioning something either from the Flintstones or SpongeBob. I don't know. Maybe he lives under the sea and under a rock, or that's Patrick, I think. But in any event, unless you've been living under a rock, everybody is aware of the Trump administration's really quite unprecedented firings of agency board members across.
What, is he making changes? Has he made changes?
Just a couple.
Okay.
Across the U.S. government. And, he's losing a lot of these cases at the district court level, and which would be the trial court level. Some of these cases have gone up on appeal. He's been a little bit more successful at the appellate court level. But ultimately, I think that these agency board member cases are going to end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I just want to point out that the Supreme Court in prior cases, this current court, has definitely indicated that they're receptive to the administration's assertions of authority to have this broad view of presidential immunity and presidential removal powers. And I think that that he's ultimately, by reading the tea leaves here, he's ultimately going to prevail on a lot of this. And there's a statutory shield against at-will dismissals for independent agency panel members that Congress first created back in 1887. Phil, that's even before you were born, I think.
Wow. Wow. That was before AIM was founded,
Yeah, well, that's a good point. AIM goes back to what, the early 1900s?
1889 or 1898. Wow. Okay. What was it, Tim? In 98 or 89, I should know. But anyway, yeah, so 125 years ago, 26 years ago.
Yeah. So this doctrine has existed for a long time, and I think that the power to fire non-compliant officials, the focus on that is what it really boils down to. And I think that that these Supreme Court justices, I'm not going to get into all of the cases that it involves out there. There's a trilogy or 3 cases out there, but I think that ultimately Trump is probably going to prevail on the executive branch's ability to terminate these employees. And so just keep that one on the radar. Now I'm going to quickly move into something else. President Trump did get his Secretary of Labor pick confirmed on Monday of this week. The Senate confirmed Lori Chavez DeRemer as his labor secretary. Interestingly, she will oversee the Department of Labor. And some of the things, as we all know, that the Department of Labor does is that they report the U.S. unemployment rate. They regulate workplace health and safety standards, investigate minimum wage, child labor, and overtime pay disputes, and apply certain laws on union organizing and unlawful terminations. But they're really focused on the primarily OSHA and the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Department of Labor had nearly 16,000 full-time employees last year and had a budget of $13.9 billion for fiscal year 2025. A lot of prominent labor unions, including the Teamsters, endorsed Chavez DeRemer. She's a former congresswoman, Republican congresswoman from Oregon. She's the daughter of a Teamster. And during her one term in the House, she actually had endorsed the idea of the PRO Act, which we've talked about on the program a lot, which is the union's wish list of everything they wish they could get in as it applies to the National Labor Relations Act and union organizing process. So she's been confirmed now. There's only one Trump cabinet official, despite all the theater that we've seen out there from the opposition over the last couple of months. There's only one pick out there, and that's Elise Stefanik. She's been nominated as the lead representative from the United States to the United Nations. And so that is Trump's only pick that's out there. I also want to mention not only Chavez DeRemer on Monday, but yesterday, the Senate confirmed Keith Sonderling to serve as the Deputy Secretary of Labor. So that does round out the top leadership at the Secretary of at the Department of Labor. Sonderling will oversee the agency's workforce and day-to-day operations, which is obviously undergoing a large-scale transition and reduction effort driven by DOGE. And interestingly, Sonderling, he's a former Republican commissioner from the EEOC. So now he's moving from the EEOC over to the Department of Labor. He has been serving as a senior advisor at the Department of Labor since Trump took office in January. Okay. All right, so that's a lot going on at the federal level. One more at the federal level, just to put it on everyone's radar. Our own Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican senator from Missouri, has backed, is actually supporting and helping to sponsor a union-backed bill that he describes as adding a short clock to bargaining obligations for initial labor contracts. And so he actually introduced the Faster Labor Contracts Act last week, the first formal piece of a series of proposed changes to federal labor law that he has been floating in Congress. And so I think what this really indicates is he's making a concerted outreach to labor, which may indicate that he has aspirations for higher roles within the federal government. Not saying that he's going to make a run for president or try to be on a ticket.
Not going that far yet, huh?
Yeah, not that far yet, but it would indicate that with the labor outreach that he is listening to his constituents here in Missouri and also maybe trying to posture himself for additional roles.
Well, he does have a lot of labor in Missouri. I mean, most of Missouri is anchored with a couple large metropolitan areas, St. Louis, Kansas City, and most of our metropolitan areas around the country have that. And what I think I'm picking up on here, Bert, and I saw it during the national convention, the Republican National Convention, when the Teamsters Union president spoke for the first time in I don't know how long at the National Republican Convention. I'm seeing a shift starting to occur, and I wouldn't go as far as saying that a pro-labor. I'm just seeing it as pro-jobs, right? And to do that, you have to bring the labor movement, or the labor side of things, union side of things, along with you. You just can't fight it the whole way. And I'm starting to see maybe some wisdom in that, some clarity coming together. Maybe instead of both sides being adversarial, maybe being a little bit more collaborative. I don't know what your take. You work in this field better than I do, but it's more about pro-America, pro-jobs that I think I'm starting to see versus, no, if you're a union, I'm against you, period. And it's more both sides want work to be done in America.
Yeah, I think there's some unions have started to get it and are seeking to be a little bit more collaborative. Some companies have started to get it. They're seeking to be a little bit more collaborative. I don't think that translates overly broadly at this point. The statistics came out for unionization in the United States in 2024. And once again, that number ticked down, I think for the first time ever, to under 6%. 5.9% of the United States private sector workforce belongs to a union. And you contrast that from 50 years ago when that number was about 24%. It just shows that unions are having a harder and harder time continuing to try to organize employers. And the Teamsters, I think, have recognized that, and they're trying a different approach. There's a lot of other unions that are still trying the same old thing, and I think they're going to continue to get the same old results.
And I just feel like there's this really thin line, and I think it's a very, very thin line between unions and labor. I don't see them as exactly the same thing. Sometimes we use labor and we use unions, and we mean the same thing when we use those two words. But there's a lot of people who work labor-related oriented jobs who are not part of union, right?
Yes.
Basically 96% of the country would say, no, I'm part of the labor force in one way.
Well, 94. 94.
94.
I don't want to correct your math.
94%. Yeah, well, we're trending. Anyway, but, many people say I'm part of the labor force, but I'm not part of a union organization. And if we can get that to come together some, I think and politics won't be so divided on that particular word, unions or labor. Anyway,
and Phil, I just want to make it really clear. I'm talking about 5.9% of the private sector workforce.
Private sector, yeah.
Yeah, when you include governmental, public employees, a little over 10% of the United States workforce belongs to a union. But in the private sector, that number is down to 5.9%. And even when including that public sector, that's down to an all-time low as well.
Yeah, and I mean it's something I feel personally passionate about in many ways. I grew up in a union home. My parents were divorced. Both my dad and my stepfather were union workers, and played significant roles in that and shaping just the way I view the world and how I think everyone contributes, and it doesn't necessarily have to have a negative perception on it. Anyway, what I want to do, Bert, is share one thing with you. You probably didn't chance to see the comments. We have lots of fans. They're always commenting. They're saying things online. We don't get a chance to do that. But we do have one person from 5 years ago, and he comments regularly on the program, and that's our friend Dave Forsey over at Sauer Machining. And Dave was saying congratulations. Dave, I just want to say thanks for being a part of the program for 5 years. He's always commenting. He doesn't always agree with you, Bert, and your view of things, but we don't ask anyone to agree with us. We want their opinions, and he's always happy to share it. So thanks for being a part of the program, Dave. It's been a pleasure being with you for 5 years, and I know Dave wants to work for another 5 or 10 years is what he tells me. So I think he'll be along on that journey. So we'll keep seeing you every week, Dave, from that standpoint. All right. Anything else, Bert?
Nope. Just again, thanks to Dave. And Dave, I never properly got to thank you. You provided me a book. I have not had a chance to read it yet. The book called The Bully Pulpit. It's a big one. It's sitting on my desk. It's kind of like HR. It's one of those things I want to get to, but other stuff keeps getting in the way. But Dave, thank you for offering that book out to me.
Yeah. All right. Maybe next week we'll talk a little bit. I'm getting some questions. What does it cost to do some of that outsourcing help as it relates to employee engagement improvement? Maybe we'll cover some of that next week. So join us back then at 7:30 Central Time. We'll see you then. Until then, go be good to somebody.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please like it, share it, and make sure it's on your calendar. If you're an on-demand viewer, don't forget you can be part of the show by watching live at 7:30 a.m. Central every Thursday morning, when you can get your burning questions answered by using the question mark icon to the right of the player. In fact, you can ask a question now. Head over to aimea.org. Under Member Resources, you'll find This Week at Work. Click Listen Live to register for our next episode and submit a question. Or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. We'll see you next week when we discuss what's happening this week at work.